Hey, Hamilton Mill Church. I'm excited to begin week 2 of A Beginner's Guide to Winning at Life. Now listen, last week we talked about step 1, which was building a solid foundation. It's literally what Vince just talked about and the song we just talked about, that so many times we build our lives on things that are temporary, that are not eternal. But when we build our lives on Jesus, it affects when the storms come, and it affects how we feel and what happens in our lives. We don't crumble, we stay firm on that foundation, and that doesn't help us just feel like we're winning. That helps us know we are winning at life. Now, each week builds on each other, and so don't worry if you missed week 1. You won't be lost today, but make sure you go back and listen to it. You can listen to it on our website, our app, or our podcast. But for this week, here's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about being successful. Do you feel like you're being successful today? Maybe this week, maybe this year already. For me, I love to find out what success looks like, and the way I do that is I study what successful people do. And the reason I do that is because I want to feel successful. I'm sure some of you would want to do that too. And so to feel successful, I feel like if I mimic what successful people do, and I study what they do, and I apply that to my life, then I'll be able to be successful like them. So I want to share with you some of my research this morning. Here's one thing that successful people do. The first thing they do is they start the night before. It's crazy. What they do is before they go to bed, those people who I would consider successful and winning at life, every night they would look at their next day and determine what needs to happen the next day or that week. Another thing they do is they have a morning routine. So that night before, they've determined what's gonna happen the next morning. Here's the crazy thing. Every morning, they do the same thing. Literally, every morning. It's so boring. I'm like, it's literally the exact same thing. They know what to expect as soon as the morning hits, as soon as they wake up. The third thing they do is they keep a rigorous schedule. They are crazy when it comes to time management. In fact, every single minute of the day, they are scheduled. They know exactly what's gonna happen, when it's gonna happen, and what to work on in those moments. So they keep a rigorous schedule. And the last thing I wanna share with you that they do is they focus on productivity. I don't know how they get so much done, but they are so productive. And it must be part of their schedule. It must be part of their morning routine or what they do the night before. But they have what's considered a traditional to-do list, like call your mom, pick up laundry, send that email, all those things, right? The things that we love checking off in our to-do app or our notebook. Don't you just love scratching out to-do lists? Oh my gosh, it's so satisfying. But they have a to-do list, and here's the thing that might be worth the price of admission this morning. They also have a to-don't list. And on this to-don't list, it's things you never scratch out. It's things you always don't do. For example, one of the things they might have is I never check social media while at work. I don't scroll while at work. Another one could be I don't respond to emails when I'm in deep work mode, when I'm focused on this one thing. Or finally, the last one might be I don't say yes to every opportunity that comes my way. Do you see how that keeps them focused? And see, this list isn't exhaustive. It is just 4 of the things I wanted to share with you today, but do you notice one thing with all 4 of these things? They all seem to be boring, like there's no fun in their life, it looks like, but they're consistent. They have a routine. They have something every single day that they know they're doing. One of my favorite podcasts that I love listening to is the Craig Groeschel Leadership Podcast. It's a pastor out in Oklahoma, and it's not just for ministry, it's also for life, and it is so helpful. And he says this specific thing about successful people. He says, successful people do consistently what others do occasionally. Successful people who you and I would consider are winning at life, do things on a regular basis. What others do, when I feel like it, when I get to it, when I can. Do you notice the difference? And so for me, I'm trying to become more consistent in my things. And it's not saying we're failing if we're not being consistent. It's just that it's hard to be consistent these days, isn't it? I mean, life is hard. When we try to do something consistent, life just hits us. Maybe it gets hard and you're like, I don't need more hard in my life right now. Or maybe you're like, I haven't seen the results. I've tried it for a little bit, but I didn't see the results. Well, that's why that statistic is fascinating that says that 80% of people abandon their New Year's resolutions by February. And some of you are like, February? I did it January 2nd, you know? But that's the thing, is we do try to be consistent. It's not like we're failing, but maybe we're not winning because we're not being consistent. Now, we do consistent things in our life. There's things we have to do in order to survive, right? If you have kids, you're like, I gotta keep them alive. I wanna be contributing members of society, so you've gotta keep taking care of them. Maybe it's eating. You're like, I've got to eat to live. And so maybe it's not always the best thing, but you eat to live consistently. Laundry, please do laundry, otherwise you smell, right? Like laundry is something you have to do consistently. Or finally, maybe it's even bringing in income, right? That's something you have to do consistently to provide for your basic needs. And so we all do those things to survive. But that's not what we're talking about in this series, is it? We're not here just to survive. We want to win at life. We want to thrive. So how do we get to that point where we take our desires, a desire to be consistent? How do we move from doing things occasionally to being consistent? It's through our actions, right? There's this book I just finished reading. It's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's a fascinating book that talks about how to start good habits and how to stop bad habits. And he gives you a step-by-step guide to how to do that. And in his book, he says this. He says, every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. Every action, every move you make, every step you take, I'll be watching you. Sorry, that's not what I meant. Every action you take, everything you do is a vote, is to become the person you want to become, to feel like you're winning, to know you're being successful. But that creates a tension, right? Does the actions you're doing, you're taking right now, or the steps you're taking right now, leading you to feel like you're successful? And if you're in here, you're like, yes, I do. I'm good. Great. You can tune me out for the rest of the message, and I want to talk to you afterwards about your systems so I can learn from you. For the rest of us, how do we become consistent in taking action to become who we want to become? How do we become consistent so that we can feel like and know like we're winning at life? Well, that's what I want to talk to us about the rest of our time today. And the way we're going to do that is going to look at the life of a guy named Paul. Now, we've talked about Paul a lot here. He's an apostle, which means he spent time with Jesus in person. And Paul, the reason I love studying the life of Paul is he was so consistent in what he did. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to write half of the New Testament that we read out of. And we wouldn't be talking about Jesus today if it weren't for him. Because you see, he was the one who took the good news about Jesus, that Jesus died for our sins and came back to life, showing us that we can have a relationship with our Heavenly Father, that we can know that God is for us, not against us. He took that out of Jerusalem to every Gentile. And a Gentile is anyone not of Jewish descent, which I would say is a majority of us in this room. And he did that so well, so purposefully, that we are still talking about it today, 2,000 years later. So I think he's got a life worth studying, right? And so in his letter to the church at Corinth, he kind of sets up how he accomplished his mission, how he actually, I would say, won at life. And here's what he says in his letter. Don't you realize that in a race, everyone runs, but only one person gets the prize? Yes, Captain Obvious. I think we know how a race works, Paul. Why are you telling us that, right? Well, Paul is saying here, he's like, hey, when you run in a race, like I know how a race works, you know how a race works. We line up, we can see everybody next to us, and when it says go, we run. And if we pass everybody else, what happens? We've won. If we get behind everybody else, we lose. It's natural. We know how we're doing against others in a competition. In football, you line up against the other team, and if you pass them with the ball and you get to the end zone and your goal and you score and your points are higher than the other points, you know you're winning. It's easy in a competition. Here's the reason Paul's saying that. He's saying in life, it's so much harder to know if you're winning, right? It's really tough, especially these days, to know if you're winning. Let me give you an example. In dating, how do you know when you're winning in the relationship? Like, how do you know? Like, it's a competition. You're like, maybe it's time to pop the question. I don't know what's really going on in his head or her head. How do I know if they like me to the point where I can commit to this relationship? In work, man, you can hit your KPIs, your key performance indicators, you can hit your goals, but you never really know if your boss thinks you're working hard enough, right? It's so hard. You can look at other people, but you really don't know if you're winning at life. And so Paul said, because in competition, it's easier to know that and life is harder, here's what I want you to do. He says, run to win. I love that statement. Here's why. It gives us permission to have ambition, right? It allows us to lean into the things, to want to win in life. It's not bad to feel that, especially because God puts desires within us to want to win, to want to do great things. He's given us each a purpose for those of us who are followers of his room and chosen to follow him. We're followers here. And so he says, run to win. Now, here's the hard part. Here's what rubs us the wrong way for those of us who are Christians. We might say, well, I thought we were supposed to be meek and mild and quiet. Well, Jesus does say that, But you know what else Jesus says? He says, make disciples of all nations. He says, be as innocent as doves and as shrewd as serpents. He's saying it's both those things. He says, when you do this, when you have ambition, don't leave a wake of people behind you. And definitely, well, there goes transit. Did you hear that? Don't leave a wake of people behind you, but definitely run this race to always win. Live in such a way that you want to win. Why? Because we're not here to survive. We're here to thrive. It's so easy to run the rat race of life. Just chauffeuring kids to one place, going to kids' activities, going to work, coming home, and doing the same thing over and over. Instead, live in such a way that you actually want to win. But you've got to pay the price to do that. There's always a price to compete in a race, in a competition, isn't there? So what's that price? Here's what he says next. All athletes are disciplined in their training. So there it is, there's the price. Discipline in their training. See, what Paul brings into is the Isthmian Games, which was the precursor to the Olympic Games. And it would be annual, and for 10 months out of the year, athletes would train with a rigorous schedule where they would do strength training, resistance training, sleep, rest on specific schedules, and deprive themselves, just kind of like today, of eating certain foods that are like sweet or fatty foods, except for bacon. Bacon is good for you. It's nutritious. It's a nutritious diet. They never deprive themselves of bacon. And so that's why he said, you discipline yourselves. They told themselves, I would deprive myself. I would not do certain things, and that would take me away from competing to win. And I would do certain things that might even feel painful in the moment, but in the long run, it was better for me. And what would they do that for? Where he says, they do it to win a prize that will fade away. So they would do it for these crowns that were made of like leaves, like laurel leaves and celery leaves. What would happen to those leaves after 3 days? They would die. They would become brittle. They would turn to dust. And Paul's like, why would they do that? Why wouldn't they do it for something that showed that they won for their whole life? And he says, but we do it for an eternal prize, right? And he's speaking to Christians here. He's saying, Christians, what we do it for, we don't do it for ourselves. We don't live lives for our own glory. We don't live lives so that we can have a prize, but we do it for God's glory. We do it to make sure everyone knows that he is for them and not against them, and that Jesus loves them. And so because of that, here's what he says next. He says, because of the eternal prize, he says, I do it with purpose. Next slide, please. So I run with purpose in every step. I am not just shadow boxing. See, Paul says, I'm not wasting a moment in my life. If I'm doing this for an eternal prize so that every single person can know about Jesus, I'm gonna make sure every single moment of my life counts. And I step with purpose. I don't shadow box. And for me, when I read that, I immediately went to my workout app because I do a shadow boxing app in my workout. So I'm like, what do I do? Oh, I punch the air and I burn calories. And Paul's like, don't just burn calories, actually move with purpose. Actually do it so you actually have a purpose in every single thing you do. And so Paul says, this is how I do it. And this is our next step in the Beginner's Guide to Winning at Life. He says this, I discipline my body like an athlete, training it to do what it should. He says, I tell my body what to do. My body doesn't tell me what to do. If my body has urges and desires, I resist them. I tell my body exactly what to do. And some translations say he buffets his body or he beats his body. That wasn't literal. It was him saying, I guide my body, even though it hurts sometimes, even though he went through shipwrecks, even though he went through beatings, through floggings, through all these things, so that people will know ultimately what his purpose was to know, for them to know about Jesus. And he disciplined himself so much so that he came up with this reason, that he had such a powerful reason to not do it, that his discipline led to him not wanting to be disqualified. And those two are equally related. See, you can discipline yourself. You can have all these things that you want to do, but if you don't have a good enough reason to do it, you're going to quit when the going gets tough. And he says, I do it so I won't be disqualified. Just a little backstory on Paul. He didn't want to be disqualified from being an apostle because before he became an apostle, someone who met with Jesus and received a purpose from Jesus, he was a Christian killer. He went around and killed anybody who didn't follow God's law because he was a Pharisee. But here's the problem. The Pharisees had a fence around God's law. It wasn't truly God's law. They put man-made traditions and rules so you wouldn't get close to breaking God's law. And so Paul was so zealot that he went one day on the way to kill and persecute some Christians in Damascus. And Jesus appears to him and says, I give you a new purpose. And that purpose is to make sure everyone, every Gentile knows about the good news. And so Paul's saying, I have to finish this race. I have to live with purpose. I have to accomplish my goal. Why? So I will not be disqualified. So you can't say I am who I am. You can't say I never finished or I accomplished the goal God gave me. Sounds intense, doesn't it? But hey, we're here today because of him. So I feel like what Paul's trying to tell us, what Paul wants us to hear from that is, listen, you can't win at life by wishing. You can't win at life by hoping to win. You win at life by preparing, by making choices that lead you to become the person you want to become, to lead you to accomplish the goal that you have put in place for yourself so that people will know who you are so you won't be disqualified. But it all begins with making the choice in the moment. So what choices am I talking about? Well, I've got some boxes over here to illustrate that. Specifically with this first box, I've got something that I've been resisting this whole time as I smelled it standing right there. And it's a maple bacon donut. Oh wait, it's bacon, so it's good for me, right? Like, absolutely, thank you. This donut, oh my gosh, I love donuts. I'm doing everything I can not to eat it right now. I will feel so good eating this in a moment, won't I? It tastes good, it helps me feel good, man, and I just want to eat as many as possible. Now, what happens if I make the choice to eat that donut consistently? Well, it's full of carbs, so I'll have an energy high, but then I won't have lasting energy. I'll grow this way, right? Maybe not in the way I want to grow. So what's the alternative? What's the other choice I should make? A salad. I can't stand salad. Oh my gosh. I feel like a rabbit eating it. It tastes like dirt, and I'm hungry 30 seconds after I eat it. Well, that's because I haven't put ranch all over it. Well, that defeats the purpose, okay? But what happens if I eat salad consistently? I'll get leaner. I'll have more energy because of the nutrients. I'll feel stronger, and I'll know it was the right choice in the long run, right? Now, in this box, I've got my phone. Man, I'll tell you what, I love my phone way too much. I love scrolling on social media just to decompress, right? At night, just to relax. I love laughing on TikToks. I love seeing what other people are doing. But sometimes, in the moment, it feels great, but then I start comparing myself or wanting what other people have. It's not bad, but I kind of want it, right? And it kind of leaves me feeling empty the more time I spend on it. So this represents growth. This is a book. It represents growth. Reading is not fun to me. Reading is boring to me, all right? But it takes mental energy, and it causes me to focus more than I want to. At the same time, it does help me grow. I'll apply the principles, and in the long run, it helps me become essentially the successful leader I was talking about earlier. This last one, I've got my laptop in here, and this represents work. I am a workaholic. I could work 24/7, and to be honest, the reason I'll tell you, don't tell anybody I told you this, but it's because it makes me feel good about myself, right? When I send that email and I check something off my to-do list, it feels good. I do it so much, sometimes I bring it home, and it eats into my family time, but I gotta get that done. There's a deadline, there's things I need to get done, there's people who need to know about what I'm trying to tell them. But I could also make the choice of spending time with my family or other relationships in my life that I need to put more effort into. But relationships are hard. Gosh, and I don't see a return right away, especially with my teenage kids, because they don't want to spend time with me anyways. But man, I'll tell you what, it's worth it. Because then we grow stronger together as a family, or I go stronger together in my marriage or with my friends, right? Now, you don't have to, this is like a board game. You don't have to play a board game, and if you were here last week, definitely don't play Monopoly with your family. It tears you apart like my family. Oh my goodness, gosh. But these things all represent choices we need to make to become who we want to become, right? But we've got to make the choice. See, the problem is we never know when to make the right choice if we haven't determined what the choice is ahead of time, if we haven't put a system into place beforehand. Back to Atomic Habits, James Clear says it this way. He says, you do not rise to the level of your goals. You don't go to the place where you're like, I hope I'm gonna be a better parent. I wish to do things to feel like I'm winning. I hope to secure my nest egg. No, you fall to the level of your systems. See, the thing is, we can hope and wish all we want, but that doesn't actually cause us to grow. Our systems is what determines our consistency. What we put into place every single day, the steps we take, that's what we fall to. That's what determines who we end up becoming. And that leads us to step 2 of the beginner's guide. See, step 2 is begin a discipline. Start doing something that, yeah, you might not like, but in the long run, it's better for you. I know when you see this, you're like, oh, great, Rahul. Man, that just hurts. I don't want to do that. I've tried that. And here's the thing. So many of us want the product of discipline without the pain of discipline, right? Many of us want the results without putting in the work. We just want what happens to happen. And that's why we need to begin a discipline. So here's what I want to do. For the rest of our time, I want to give you 4 easy steps to begin a discipline, to know that you're winning at life. So step 1 is know your why. So Paul had a compelling reason, right? He had a compelling reason as to what he wanted to accomplish and why he wanted to accomplish it. It wasn't just, I need to tell people about Jesus. It was, so I will not be disqualified. See, it's easy to tell ourselves a reason, but emotion is gonna trump reason every single time. Emotion trumps reason to your why. You need to have emotions put behind your reason. Let me explain. Going back over here. You could say, I want to get healthier, right? I've got a donut salad. I want to get healthier. Or what if you said, I want to have enough energy to be able to keep up with my kids or grandkids? That's more compelling than just wanting to be healthier. For the phone in the book, you could say, man, I really spend too much time on social media. Or I really spend too much time on my phone. I really want to grow. Or you could say, I want to grow in this specific area so that I know I am winning, and then I want to not compare myself to anymore else. Instead, I want to focus on myself instead of what other people, so I can become who God wants me to become. Or you could say, I want to grow in this area so much so that when a promotion comes into play, my name is the first name my boss thinks of. That's more compelling, isn't it? For the work and relationships, you could say, I really just need to spend more time with my family. Or you could say, I want to grow so close to my family, especially my kids, so that when they do something wrong, they don't run from me, they run to me. And we get closer and closer together that when they leave the nest, they want to come home and spend time with us. Or you could say, I want to spend so much time with my wife so that when the kids leave, we still have a strong bond. Whatever it is, you need a compelling reason. You've got to know your why. Otherwise, when it gets tough, you're going to abandon it. We're going to quit, aren't we? You know that. We've done that before. So step 1, know your why. Step 2, make a plan. This is where your system comes into place. This is where you have to make a plan. And you could say, let's say you want to start a morning routine like successful people do. You're going to say, every morning I'm going to do blank, blank, blank. I'm going to set my breakfast down. I'm going to read this. I'm going to do this. And then you need to calendar it. Because don't we calendar what's most important to us? We schedule what's most important to us. Like every Monday, or every day, I'm gonna do these things because it's so important to us. We're gonna put it as a reminder every single moment we can. And after you make a plan, here's the 3rd step. You're gonna start small. You're gonna start small. Finish this statement for me. How do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time, right? We have these lofty goals of what we want to accomplish, and we set out, we're like, I'm gonna do it. And then when we set out to do it, what happens? We forget about it. We haven't scheduled it. We haven't made a plan. We haven't actually created steps to get to our ultimate goal. So let me give you some examples. Let's say you want to get healthier, and you could say, I'm going to do 1 push-up every single day. Let's say you want to bring a bottle of water to work every single day. Or maybe you want to be a reader, because leaders are readers. So you say, every night before I go to bed, I'm going to read 1 page a day. Or maybe you want to start a morning routine. So you're like, instead of waking up at 7 a.m., I'm gonna wake up at 6 a.m. But with that specific example, what happens if you set your alarm tomorrow for 6 a.m.? Snooze, 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 phone goes across the room, right? That's usually what happens. But instead, with the morning routine, what if instead you told yourself, I'm gonna never hit snooze again at 7 a.m.? And you're like, whoa, how does this help me accomplish the goal of starting a morning routine or being healthier or whatever, or reading a book a month or whatever? Well, here's why. Studies have shown that when you start small, you're more likely to do it, you're more motivated, and it creates a snowball effect that leads to more discipline to accomplish the goal you want to accomplish. Bringing a water bottle to work every day. I didn't say drink a bottle of water every day, because if I did, you'd drink a bottle of water every day. But when you fill a bottle of water, take it to work, it's always there. Studies have shown you actually drink 2 bottles of water a day. 1 push-up, you're like, man, I'm already down on the ground, let's just do 2. And by week 4, you're doing 10 a day. Right? Reading a page a night, you might be like, Well, I'm not tired yet. Let me read one more page. And then you've read a whole book in a month. Or maybe for the snooze, you're like, I'm gonna snooze, but now I'm actually waking up right away, so let me set the clock 15 minutes earlier. Do you see how that works with starting small? You're creating momentum, and that's the goal. Now, this last step I almost didn't put in here because I know your response, but I'm gonna tell it to you anyways. It's plan to fail. And certain people in the room immediately just said, challenge accepted, Rahul, right? Because you're like, no, I'm not gonna fail. Or maybe you're on the other side and you're quoting Spider-Man Far From Home, or No Way Home, where you say, expect disappointment and you'll never be disappointed. Okay, listen, it's neither of those. It's in the middle. What I'm trying to say is give yourself grace. You have permission to not be perfect. You're gonna mess up. You're not gonna accomplish it every single moment you wanted to. But here's something I tell myself that maybe you could use. When I miss a day, that night before the next day, here's what I tell myself. Never miss twice. Never miss twice. You know what? Say it with me. Never miss twice. And here's why. If you miss twice, it's easier to quit. But if you only miss once, you actually keep the consistency going, and you've never actually broken the consistent loop. And you start doing it consistently. You notice the habit is formed because you've started with a discipline. Now, you might be here going, that's great, Rahul. That's easy, that's simple. It is the beginner's guide. I've tried this, and it didn't work. And some of you are feeling guilty right now. Or you might be in here going, I do this. I'm great, but I still don't feel successful. I still don't feel like I'm winning at life. Well, here's why. A lot of times we start a discipline in one area of our life, right? Imagine trying to start a discipline in every area of your life. That sounds terrible. That's like, oh my gosh, that's so hard. And that you're never gonna really feel like you're winning at life until all your areas have a discipline. But what if I could tell you today, for the rest of our time, I can give you one specific discipline, one discipline that will rule them all, right? That'll be the keystone habit, as Charles Duhigg in his book, The Power of Habit, talks about, that will affect the rest of your life and help you be more disciplined in every area of your life. Here it is. I want you to begin a spiritual discipline. Not any discipline, a spiritual discipline. Don't tune me out. Some of you are like, oh, here's the preacher, man, making me feel guilty, telling me I gotta read my Bible and pray. That's what I'm trying to do. No, just kidding. Just kidding. That's not, just kidding. The reason I want you to begin a spiritual discipline is this builds on what we talked about last week, which was step one, was build a solid foundation. Here's what Jesus said last week. He says this, he says, slide. Okay, it's coming. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. See, once you've built a solid foundation on Jesus, then you've got to hear his words and put them into practice. But how do you know his words? By spending time with him, right? That's all a spiritual discipline is spending time with Jesus. And here's the cool thing. It's so beneficial and it affects every area of your life. How do I know this? Well, Paul tells his protege Timothy, his apprentice Timothy, he says it this way. He says, do not waste time arguing over godless ideas and old wives' tales. Instead, train yourself to be godly. And all that means is have a life centered on Jesus. Physical training is good, but training for godliness is much better, promising benefits in this life and in the life to come. See, what Paul was telling Timothy is when you focus your life on Jesus, the benefits outweigh the discipline you have to do. What are some of the benefits? Man, I'll tell you what, godliness, it affects everything about you. It affects your view of yourself, view of your marriage, view of your family. It helps you run your business better. It gives you more joy, and it helps you feel like you're actually winning at life. And actually, it doesn't just make you feel like that. You know you're winning at life. Let me illustrate it this way. Have you ever met someone whose life is centered on God? Someone who is so focused on Jesus and spends time with Jesus all the time. What are they like? They're peaceful. They're at peace with themselves, which means they're content. They seem to be happier. They're wise. Man, they're leaders. You respect them. You love spending time with them because they're so others focused that they focus on you instead of themselves. They're the type of people who you look at and you say, man, I really hope one day my son or daughter marries someone like them. That's someone who's centered on Jesus. That's what godliness looks like. So how do we begin a spiritual discipline to end to that point? It's actually the same 4 steps as we talked about last time. It's the same 4 steps. Number 1, know your why. So what's your why for it? Well, you're doing it not for your own glory, for God's glory and for people around you, right? That's more compelling than even just yourself, and it affects every other discipline in your life. Number 2, make a plan. So how do you make a plan? Well, I believe you should do it with a time and a place. A time and a place. Now, you can do it whenever. You can spend time with Jesus wherever you are, whenever. But I love to do it in the morning. I love to do it because based on what Jeff Henderson says. He says it this way. The best way to start your day is to hear what Jesus has to say, right? It's so easy to wake up and what? Grab your phone, check your email, and then you just get bogged down in the details. But instead, start your life with the one who gave you life and who knows you and wants to give you joy all the time. And so you start with a time, all right? And that could be the morning, could be whenever for you. And then you find a place. Now, this place is a place where your brain, when you take that time and step into that space, you go, this is my time with Jesus. Your brain automatically goes to rest and dependence on him. It could be a Lego-free zone on the floor, right? It could be your backyard, could be your car, could be even your office. Whatever it is for you, that's where you want to go. So what we've decided to do is to help you with this so you don't just have a time and a place. We actually want to help you with a plan. And so we've created a website. It's our habits page on our church website, hamiltonvillechurch.org/habits. And on there, we're going to give you steps to take that will help you turn this into a discipline. And on that page, you'll see things like what the 3 things we want you to do, or we feel you could do to help you begin this spiritual discipline. And what we say is read, pray, listen. Read, pray, listen. Read something. Read the Bible or read a devotional that points you to Jesus. Pray. Talk to God about what you read or about what's in your heart. And then take a moment and listen. Just listen for God. And that's it. Read, pray, listen. And so on that website, we've got Bible reading plans to help you be consistent. We've got an assessment to teach you or to show you the best way you connect with God. And then we've got this study that you can do by yourself or with a group that shows you the practices of Jesus, which are essentially other spiritual disciplines you can do. So definitely check it out. It's very helpful. So that's make a plan. Next is start small. Don't try and say, I'm going to read the whole Bible in a month. That's crazy. I can't even read it in a year, so good luck with that. But what you want to do is start small. What does that look like? When you grab your coffee in the morning, maybe you say, I'm just going to read a quick verse on my phone. It could be when I'm driving to work, or when I get to work, I'm going to say a prayer. Or if you're in car line, I'm going to listen to worship music. Or on your way home, I'm going to thank God for one thing. Just start small if you're developing this for the first time because it'll, snowball into something greater where you want to be. And last but not least, plan to fail. You're going to mess up. Give yourself grace. It's okay. Jesus gives you all the grace in the world. It's going to be okay. But if you miss once, what do? Never miss twice, right? That's your goal. Discipline is not fun. It's hard work, man, and it takes a while to see these results. Guys, but it's worth it, isn't it? It is so worth it to do these 4 steps. And when you do it, man, the benefits are endless. Let me show you what the author of Hebrews says about this. They say, no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. Can't we all use a little more peace right now? Especially these days. And it gives you that and more. It gives you wisdom in each situation. It gives you direction that you've been hoping for, maybe you've been looking for, because you start spending time with Jesus and you start taking his words and putting them to action. And when you become consistent, you create systems and habits in your life that end up helping you know you're winning, know you're being successful. So let's be a people who don't shadow box in the air. Let's be a people who tell our body what to do, not allow our bodies to tell us what to do. Let's be a group of people who are disciplined. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to begin a spiritual discipline.